The morning sky was washed in pale gray as distant church bells echoed softly through the still air. Slowly, mourners made their way through the iron gates, their faces etched with sorrow. Among them stood a young girl beside a coffin, the one that carried her only parent, her father. He had been her light, her protector, the one who read her bedtime stories and promised she would never be alone. But life often breaks its promises in silence. As the final clumps of earth covered his resting place, Emily's fragile world collapsed. She hugged a small, worn-out teddy bear to her chest, her eyes swollen from endless tears, unaware that her suffering had only begun. Whispers of pity drifted among the crowd, murmurs about how cruel fate could be. But just a few steps behind Emily stood her stepmother, elegant in black, her face painted with false grief. Behind that veil of mourning hid something far colder than sorrow, resentment. She had never wanted Emily, never accepted her as part of her new life. And now, with the father gone, there was no one left to stop her cruelty. By the time the funeral ended, Emily's teddy bear was damp with tears, and her stepmother's icy words sliced through the air. You don't belong here anymore. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the compassion that saves hearts when hope is fading, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories of Kindness, where tales of humanity continue to shine light in dark places. The day stretched on. As the sun pierced through the clouds and the mourners drifted away, Emily, in a loose cream dress far too big for her tiny frame, was dragged back to the house that once felt like home. But that home was gone. Her stepmother wasted no time. Clothes were yanked from drawers and thrown into an old suitcase, tossed out onto the driveway as if Emily herself were unwanted luggage. Please, Mommy, forgive me? The little girl cried, her voice trembling. Though she had done nothing wrong, she hoped the words might melt the woman's heart. But instead, a bucket of cold water was dumped over her, soaking her from head to toe. Her tears mingled with icy droplets as she knelt helplessly on the ground. People passing by paused, whispering, but no one stepped forward. A man across the street shook his head sadly before hurrying away. Emily's stepmother gave a cruel smirk and slammed the door behind her, leaving the child alone on the pavement, her teddy bear in her arms and her suitcase spilling open beside her. The sun blazed high, the world alive with birdsong and summer warmth. But to Emily, it was the coldest day she'd ever known. Then, from the end of the driveway, a black car rolled to a stop. The door opened, and a tall man in a sharp suit stepped out. His face was calm, his eyes heavy with empathy, the kind that comes from knowing pain. His name was Alexander, a wealthy businessman known throughout town. But for Emily, he would soon become far more than a name. He had been on his way to a meeting when he saw her. A child abandoned, drenched in water, surrounded by broken pieces of her small world. Something in him cracked open. Memories of his own lonely childhood returned. Nights of grief after his mother's death, and the sting of rejection from those who should have cared. Without hesitation, he crossed the street and approached her. Emily looked up at the sound of his footsteps, a fragile hope flickering. For a second, she thought it might be her father coming back for her. But it was Alexander. He knelt beside her, not caring that his suit was now soaked from the puddles around her. Placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, he said in a voice steady yet full of compassion, "This ends now. No one will ever treat you like this again." The words hung in the air like a sacred promise. Hearing the commotion, her stepmother stormed outside, shouting insults and calling Emily a burden. But Alexander didn't flinch. Looking her directly in the eyes, he replied, "If you can abandon her after her father's funeral, you don't deserve to be called a mother. From today onward, she is no longer unwanted. She's under my care." Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. The stepmother froze, realizing she could not defy the power in his words. With a final huff, she turned away and slammed the door again. But this time, for Emily, that sound wasn't rejection. It was freedom. Alexander picked up her suitcase, retrieved the teddy bear from the ground, and took her trembling hand in his. For the first time since her father's death, Emily felt a faint warmth return to her heart. Together, they walked toward the car, leaving behind the house that had become a prison of cruelty. The days that followed were not simple. Emily often woke from nightmares, afraid she would be abandoned again. But Alexander was patient. He surrounded her with care, tutors, comfort, and safety. But more than anything, love. He read her stories at bedtime, listened when she cried, and reminded her every day that she was wanted. Slowly, laughter replaced tears. Her eyes began to shine once more. The same townspeople who once ignored her now whispered not about tragedy, but about kindness. They saw how Alexander, despite his fortune, valued compassion above everything else. And they watched as Emily, once cast aside, grew into a symbol of resilience and hope. Months later, beneath a gentle afternoon sun, Emily placed a bouquet of flowers on her father's grave. "Don't worry, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm safe now." Alexander stood a few steps behind, silent, ready to steady her if she stumbled. Then the clouds parted, and a ray of sunlight fell upon them both. Though her father was gone, Emily finally felt she had found a home. Not in walls or wealth, but in the heart of someone who truly cared. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Stories of Kindness. Because even in the darkest times, kindness can change everything. Before you go, tell us in the comments, what does kindness mean to you? Your words may inspire someone who needs hope today. And so, as the sun set on Emily's long journey from grief to healing, her story stood as a reminder that sometimes, family isn't the one we're born into. It's the one we find when love steps in, often when we least expect it.